didn't get any doors really opening. So I sat back and reevaluated, asking, what are you trying to show me? And what I got was, if you want to affect change, do it one consciousness at a time. So I relied on my bachelor's and went into classroom teaching and began as my side gig to run energy medicine and holistic health and wellness sessions and teach meditation to adults. So then I started a club in the middle school where I was teaching to help boys with meditation who were getting labeled as ADD. One Saturday morning, fast forward 2.5 years into this career, and the side gig I just described, I was balancing my checkbook pre-digital banking days, and I was horrified with what I was seeing because I knew there was supposed to be adventure in my life and abundance, and I was not okay with feeling caged for 3 decades of my life or more, just doing the same thing and having a sense of limitation, restriction, and struggle.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Alison Kay, who will share her insights on energy medicine. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. I want to start with a story today. One evening, an elderly grandfather told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between 2 wolves inside of all of us. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It's joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about this for a minute and asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The grandfather replied simply, "The one that you feed." My question to you is, which one do you feed? We all have programming that was created when we were younger. And if you want to grow well, sometimes we need a software upgrade. Are you ready to upgrade yours? Our guest will be demonstrating how she does that in today's episode. Dr. Alison Kay has secrets no one else uses to upgrade, inspire, disrupt old paradigms within her community, the collective. She's an award-winning international best-selling author and the founder of the Vibrational upgrade system. She is an experienced subtle energy practitioner and a natural healer with a holistic approach towards helping others thrive in mind, body, and spirit. This is reinforced by her 10 years in Asia studying subtle energies and ancient wisdom, with 20 years working in teaching yoga, meditation, energy medicine, mind-body fitness, longevity, and holistic health, with a specialized focus on our chakra system. She brings a unique perspective that facilitates massive change. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Dr. Alison Kay. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Oh, there was nothing at school. So I know, Rocky, I grew up in a middle class environment, upper middle class. My parents got wealthier as I grew into high school and graduated, went to college. They saw it as their duty to provide each of their 4 kids with their undergraduate. We had to work through undergraduate to have spending money. I've been working since I've been 12. I started cleaning houses at age 12 so I could have spending money, and then babysitting. So my dad, I think, comes from a position, he was in the financial industry, he's now retired. So he had a very great understanding of money. Neither of my parents grew up wealthy. My mom actually was firstborn American. My grandmother, her mother, was an immigrant and spoke Yiddish. She didn't speak English. My dad's father, with an English accent, came and started a laundry business. So that was kind of blue collar. My dad was the first one in his family to go to college in his generation. So, they started as their duty to give us an undergraduate degree, and education was really important. And I would ask for things, like I asked for a horse when I was a teenager because I had girlfriends in high school and junior high that had horses, and I would always go to the barn and ride them as well as help care for them. And I couldn't get a horse. However, I was really intent on doing an exchange program that I saw I wanted to do to learn Spanish. And I actually asked my high school Spanish teacher, hey, can we start an exchange program? And he did. And so I went to Venezuela and had to really beg and plead for that. So I didn't get a lot above the, having a really great roof over my head, lots of love, and growing up in a rural environment 30 minutes south of Boston.
It sounds like, though, they did teach you the value of money and teach you at least how to earn money.
Yeah, my mom actually, what's really interesting, Rocky, and listeners, is my mom took, because of the way she grew up, and my dad, they were both big on saving. I had heard I can remember, you save 10% of, what you're making. And I never really listened later in my 30s. And I know that when I was growing up, my mom took my older brother and I to the bank with like bags of pennies that we had saved from our chores, because we did chores around the house and got an allowance. And she helped us open a savings account with those little green books. And I was like doing that, I think, since age 7, maybe. So, yeah.
So good foundation for you.
I'd say so, yeah. That makes it into my gratitude journal, too, a couple times a week, for my foundation. That it was good and solid and loving.
So you recount that.
In my gratitude journal, a couple times a week, every week, yeah. Very aware of it.
Very nice. After, did you go straight to Asia after college, or did you do some things in between?
I did some stuff in between.
Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a story. That's why I'm kind of like looking at you the way I am. I went into college as a psych major. My mom early on in my teens had identified, she said, Alison, you're really good with people. You have like this natural understanding. You might want to consider psychology. So I did. And I felt a yes and went in 3rd semester in. I was horrified because I was like, you're not teaching me how to be the happiest, most thriving version of myself. You're focused on the hardwiring, improving yourself as a science, and not answering any real questions about how do we be the happiest, most thriving versions of ourselves. So I left that major, went into 2 other ones, and then ultimately ended up in English Lit. Moved out west to San Francisco from Massachusetts. And as I was waiting to get into my master's program in English Lit and creative writing, I got asked to be a political consultant. And I had a lot of success because it was electing people to the California State Assembly and the federal level to write legislation, not just vote yes, but write legislation that was going to protect the environment. So I helped get the first Latina woman elected to the California State Assembly, and she actually wrote legislation once she was in that saved the last bit of green space in LA Basin. And then they put me in an even more intense race because I was doing so well, and I had to learn how to manage my stress because of the amount of success. So I learned to meditate, and when the election season was over, I backpacked overseas for 6 months, living outside the country again, at various places for a month at a time, came back, got my master's in public administration and public policy, graduated, got my first energy medicine modality as I was graduating, and did the job placement thing, asking where will I affect more change on the inside or in the system or outside the system. Didn't get any doors really opening. So I sat back and reevaluated, asking, what are you trying to show me? And what I got was, if you want to affect change, do it one consciousness at a time. So I relied on my bachelor's and went into classroom teaching and began as my side gig to run energy medicine and holistic health and wellness sessions and teach meditation to adults. So then I started a club in the middle school where I was teaching to help boys with meditation who were getting labeled as ADD. One Saturday morning, fast forward 2.5 years into this career, and the side gig I just described, I was balancing my checkbook pre-digital banking days, and I was horrified with what I was seeing because I knew there was supposed to be adventure in my life and abundance, and I was not okay with feeling caged for 3 decades of my life or more, just doing the same thing and having a sense of limitation, restriction, and struggle. And at the same time, I had a client that was getting really great results. She was on like session 4, package of 10 sessions with me using energy medicine. And I looked up at the ceiling in the midst of that session with my hands over her abdomen. And I was like, okay, how can I get even more robust results from my clients? Because we were both really stoked with what we were seeing for results. So within a month's time, I learned about the international school system. And ultimately, I did what I had to do, got interviewed from a bunch of different schools all around the world, chose Asia, and ultimately increased my net cash flow by 60% with that move, as well as learned a whole lot about how stuff becomes physical. So I learned a whole lot about consciousness and subtle energy, because in the traditional, just a real brief example to finish this segment out, in traditional Chinese medicine, there's a basic tenet that where qi goes, or where energy goes, blood follows. So what that's saying is mirroring what quantum physics has now discovered and has spent 100 years basically dealing with, that energy comes before matter. It's not the other way around. So we are, meaning like when they did the study in quantum physics and they realized that they couldn't really have a controlled laboratory setting because the outcome was being influenced by their expectations. So at that point, they realized there's no separate objective reality from the extension of our consciousness. So, I came back to the States actually, and unexpectedly, because I was tucked away in Asia during the market crash, and I unexpectedly got really proficient in running money clearings, learning about people's blocks around money and having the amount that they desire, because people that were put in front of me for workshops were not able to listen and receive. And so I asked, my guidance, what's going on here? And I asked a couple of key people who had attended the workshops. And what I learned was they were still worried about money. So I instead became proficiently, unexpectedly, like I said, aware of, I was on like a 2.5 year learning curve, it seemed like, of learning about the typical blocks people have around money.
What are the typical blocks people have around money?
Well, they blame the external forces. They'll blame the economy. They'll blame interest rates. They'll blame their socioeconomic status they grew up with. They'll blame their gender. They might have a conclusion that they're bad with money. They may know that consciously and even say it out loud and have it said to them. But then there's a whole host of what I call back of the house consciousness. It's the unconscious and subconscious. So the stats are we make about 15% of our daily choices that make our lives be what they are from the frontal lobe, which is our conscious mind. It's the thoughts you actually hear. After working with tens of thousands of people across the globe for many decades, I see it's more like 95% of the average person's choices on a daily basis are made from the not thoughts that they hear. So I'll say that in a different way. 95% of what you choose on a daily basis is made from thoughts you don't even hear. And that's the unconscious and subconscious. So an example of this is maybe you got conditioned growing up that money is the root of all evil. Then maybe you had a parental imprint from your parents' lineage that maybe they were Irish and they suffered in the potato famine. So that contraction around money got passed down genetically. Maybe you heard growing up, we can't afford that. And so you naturally don't easily spend money. That's an example. And here's another really big bias is like when we look at having more money, the typical place most people go is, how do I cut down my expenses? We're not trained, in keeping in mind my first book that I wrote, started as my dissertation for my PhD, but became my first book, What If There's Nothing Wrong? We typically go to what's wrong. Like if you look at the psychological diagnoses, or you look at the medical diagnoses, or the mind itself in its typical way of thinking, we go to what's wrong, what's the problem. So when we're looking at having more money, one of the first places we go is how do I cut down my expenses instead of how do I generate more money?
How do we reprogram the 95% of our thoughts and behaviors?
Every day in and day out. That's all I'm up to with my vibrational upgrade system. It's such a big question. But I do it successfully over and over again, day in and day out. So vibrational upgrade systems, half my background. I ultimately learned 5 energy medicine modalities. The other half of my background is a yoga and meditation teacher, including being in India and getting certified there. So I will go in and use what has come to be called Hawkeyes, where I have a really strong intuition. And I think that's in part what my mom was seeing when she said, you're naturally really good with understanding people. And I've learned tools to cultivate my intuition that I then teach my students. So I go in with my intuition when they come in saying, I don't seem to have my business flourishing as much as I want it to be. It stayed at this level. I will tune in and I will possibly ask them a couple of questions to get a sense of if this is accurate or not, what I'm hearing intuitively. And then I'll run an energy medicine clearing on the negative beliefs. A few examples I've already given, like I can't afford that, or we can't afford that, or there's never enough money, or I always have more going out than that's coming in. So I will use energy medicine to clear that out of the unconscious or the subconscious, depending on where it is. And then I'll activate the positive messaging. And then that automatic, non-thinking conclusion that just runs our lives and our life's choices is now brought to the conscious mind. So then I work with what I call applied mindfulness and do more clearings and activations to help them pull off of that neurological track. I don't have enough money. I have to be concerned about how much I spend because blah, 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 like the examples I already gave, to them to get them on a new track. Like, wait a minute, the money flow is unlimited. I can learn how to choose differently so that there's more.
Can you explain what energy medicine is that you've been talking about?
In Tibetan Buddhism, there is a spectrum, and it's on one end subtle energy, and on the other end is called crude energy. And crude energy is a way of referring to the physical, like that which, like a shirt or a computer. And so understanding that everything is made up of energy, there's the most subtle that, you can barely perceive to the most physically crude. And they call it crude because it's unwieldy, not because it's gross. So subtle energy energy medicine is working within the subtle energy system and as a medicine, helping to heal or cure or improve a situation.
When people think of medicine, right, typically they're thinking of drugs, surgery, those types of modalities, but this is vastly different.
If you come from the West, you think of those modalities, yeah. But if you come from another part of the planet, over half of the rest of the planet doesn't automatically go to that conclusion, that it involves surgery or medication for my life in order to heal something, because it's not healing, it's just band-aiding. So yes, this is working at the root of a problem from a holistic model. And again, my first book is more like a text, what if there's nothing wrong? And it goes entirely into the model. So when you go to a traditional Chinese medical or an Ayurvedic doctor, Ayurveda is from the Indian culture, yoga comes from it, and then traditional Chinese medicine, they will look at, for example, 3 different pulses. They'll look at your tongue. They'll ask you about your emotions. They'll ask you about your levels of stress. And why they're doing that is to be able to get a holistic image and understanding of the issue you're coming to them with. So when working with subtle energy, for example, I left Asia with that book in hand, my PhD in hand, and having the understanding and the awareness of, man, if we in the West only understood how subtle energy works and how our consciousness works, we'd have so much more thriving. So what I'm about is helping people understand the system, which is our consciousness, the 3 levels. Now, my background's in psych. When I was overseas, I was an administrator as well as a teacher, and I taught AP Psych. I revisited Western psychology after having over a decade and a half of meditating and teaching meditation. So I understood it now from the East and Western view. And so in my understanding of how consciousness works is 3 levels of consciousness. I've already talked about those. And then what's happening in our consciousness influences how much energy either doesn't flow in our body or it does. So the more blockages we have, the more lethargic we're going to feel, for example. I could go on. I won't.
You can. Is this something that people can do themselves?
Eventually. Can they feel it themselves? So one of the ways is if you find yourself, when I run a clearing, I mean, I could even run one now if you wanted. It takes about 5 minutes.
Let's do it.
It'll be really different for a lot of, okay. So anybody who's driving while listening to this, please pull over. Honestly, you're going to get spaced out. It's part of the nature of working in consciousness. If you're caring for a young one or an old one, please stop in this and listen to come back to it when you can be in your own space seated, because your head may fall back. You may notice yawning. You may notice a tickling. You may notice a little bit of tightness for a little bit of while, or heat in a part of your body. You may notice goosebumps. You may burp, you may hear your tummy gurgle. You may notice absolutely nothing. All of that is fine. So I'm going to just tune in for a second to your listeners. And to you, Rocky, and see what would... I don't deserve to have more money come to me easily. So what that's working on is one of the tenets that it seems like many people have is, in order to have more money, I have to work harder. So you're going to need to say yes when it becomes obvious. I'm going to end in a question tone, and then I'll go into the clearing. So I wonder what it would feel like for each of you to see and perceive that you can have more money come to you with ease. Anything and everything that doesn't allow for that, would you be willing to burn up with the flames of transmutation? That's what you say, yes.
Yes.
I'm going to be silent just for a moment here. So any and all traumas and their ensuing free-floating thoughts that block you from finding out that you're able to receive even more money than you currently do regularly with ease, burning up all of those traumas. This includes, I have to work hard. To have more money, I have to work harder. I'll have to output more to have more money. It's blocking it from happening easily. That resulted from traumas. There's also, I'm perceiving a protection of the status quo, a fear of change. And then any and all imprints from your parents and lineage that's in any way limiting your ability to find out what it feels like to have more money coming in regularly with ease. Burning those imprints out. Hearing a lot around suffering. Money causes suffering. To have more money causes suffering. Money is the root of all evil. Stay away from it. Whilst wanting more, creating a conflict. It's almost like two different parents with two different money messages working at the same time, causing confusion in you or some listeners. Okay, so now we're going to burn up any and all conditioning. Now we're going into any and all karma, including but not limited to financial karma as appropriate. That's in any way blocking you from finding out what it feels like to have more money coming in with more ease for you. I'm hearing I don't deserve. It's one of the unconscious blocks. I deserve it to be hard. That's clearing. I deserve to struggle. Obviously, you wouldn't choose to believe that. This is at the unconscious and subconscious level. Now we're going to go into across all lifetimes and timelines and dimensions, any and all contracts, oaths, or vows, or even swearings that are limiting you from finding out what it'll feel like to have more money coming in with ease, burning all of those up. This would include vows of poverty, vows of austerity, and then at all levels of consciousness, all beliefs, storylines, evaluations, judgments, expectations, and projections you have that are in any way limiting, hindering, or restricting you from finding out what it feels like to have more money coming in with more ease. We're burning it all up now with the flames of transmutation. Some of you may want to inhale through your nostrils and exhale at your own rate. Allow for release. You may notice nothing's going on. It's all okay, it's still happening. You may notice your shoulders are feeling a little bit lighter. There seems to be something clearing around the tribal belief. If you have more money coming in, you're going to, in a way, disrespect your tribe in the level of socioeconomic status you're, in air quotes, meant to be at. So if you rise above, you'll be implying disrespect. I know that it sounds irrational, and that's the nature of what I'm clearing. All this childlike logic. Just another moment. Let's go ahead and activate the upgrade now. So any and all latent keys and codes within you, including but not limited to abundance codes, prosperity codes, affluence codes, inherent talents and ancient wisdom within you, and any and all blessings and support possible to bring this all into alignment for your highest potential and your highest possibilities to become physically realized. Activating the upgrade now. Okay. You did good receiving, Rocky.
Thank you. It's like a computer, every so often you got to reprogram it and upgrade it.
You got it.
And we have the same systems. I mean, if we're running 95% on autopilot, we're running on programming. And at the end of the day, we have to reprogram the programming if we want change. Otherwise, the same thing happens day after day after day.
And then you're insane, according to Einstein.
Then you're insane, according to Einstein. You've mentioned meditation a lot, and we've covered that a bit. But one of the things I noticed that you talk about, and I think this is where people struggle, they think that in order to be a good meditator, they have to silence their thoughts.
Okay, there's no such thing as a good meditator. And a successful meditation practice is one where your mind has been loud. And I yell that to get through to you. So you've had a successful meditation if you get up off the mat and you say, God, that sucked. So why do I say that? Ernst. Okay, so a basic Buddhist tenet is all human minds are neurotic, and here are the tools to work with your own particular flavor. So you know how anybody gets self-conscious when they're being watched? Well, so does the mind. And so the whole idea is the more you sit and observe, and again, it's your conscious mind you're observing during meditation, you're observing thoughts that you are actually hearing, not what I'm doing with the energy medicine is I'm getting the parts of the thoughts you're not hearing, just to repeat. So as you observe a thought, you observe your thinking, that's the practice, because you're growing the detachment from your thinking mind so that you can allow the space for new thoughts of an upgraded nature to come in and maybe make a new choice. So I just want to say, like, when we do the clearing activation, we just did it, flushed, blocked unconscious and subconscious consciousness to the frontal lobe. So now you have a little bit less blinders, or you have your peripheral vision opened up a little bit more. So you could catch more possible choices you could make that would lead to you making more money or having more money come in, instead of it being hard, with more ease. So when you meditate, it's a great coupling with this work. You don't need it if you're steadily working with me, frankly, because it's a faster progress track than just meditating. But when you're meditating, observing your thoughts you're not meant to have a silent mind.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. They think, oh, I can't get silent, or I can't do this. And so a lot of it becomes difficult. And you have to keep, it's funny. I think the best piece of information I got years ago from one of our guests, it's like, well, how do you get to the top of the ladder? And he said, well, you can't get to the top of the ladder. You have to get to the next rung. And everyone's trying to jump to the top of the ladder instead of just to the next rung. And so it's a process, little by little. Take the next step.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I find like there's a sense of longevity I got living in Asia for a decade, a sense of perspective too. I heard a lot of my Chinese friends and colleagues talking about the weight of 5,000 years of glorious history on our shoulders as a part of the Chinese culture. And we're fresh and newer here in America, not in England. I do a lot of work in England. I'm there about a quarter of the year. I lead retreats over there. My students come and get trained in Vibrational upgrade system over there. But in America, we're fresh and young. And that sense of longevity, there's an impatience with us in America, which is not all bad. It made me ask the question, okay, how can I get even more robust results from my clients? I don't want a 10-year learning curve, So there's a lot of innovation that results from impatience, but, social media, instant gratification, all of it has made us even more impatient. And when we're working with our consciousness or our spirit or our body, all of those are of an organic nature, like a plant or like a vegetable that has to go through seedling into growth, into fruiting. We're the same way. You can't apply the mind's impatience we've been conditioned with to this kind of process. It's a different beast, different pacing.
It is. One of the things that I've seen in this space, it's always somewhat of a struggle, is, and it's because of life, right? It's not the people who are best at doing what they do that tend to thrive or be found. It's the people with the best marketing. How do you cut through that? Like, how do you figure out, is this person truly going to be able to help me, or do they just have great marketing?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it depends on the industry, right? So I know one of the guiding forces I've had when I'm looking for a teacher is, do they know more than me, frankly? And do they laugh? Do they have a sense of humor? Because then I can see the application and the fruit of some of doing this actual work and walking their path. So I think it depends on the industry. There's just one example. However, I laughed when you said that, Rocky, because I understand fully. I know that I have had one of the most repeated comments people make after stepping in and experiencing any of my work is, oh my God, Dr. Alison, you're the real deal. And I'll never forget the first time I heard that. I was like, I didn't know how to react, really. I was like, of course, I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't, But yeah, I feel like people can smell it. Energy is our first language. I feel like if you come out of your mind and you drop into your body's responses, you have a knowing. Like if your heart is lighter when you're listening to or learning from somebody, or when in your gut you feel like a sense of excitement that might feel like nervousness, that means there's potential for change there. And remembering that excitement and nervousness is the same physiological reaction. So I feel like I feel like the mind can confuse it because you can go into like the logistics, the cost, the time. But by now snazzy marketing, by now hype, you really do. Ask a question. Here's something. Ask a question as you sit there reviewing somebody. If you have a choice to make between two different people to go to for support, and good on you, first off, for letting yourself have support, frankly. And if we're talking about a product, if you're trying to decide between two calendars, which is what I was doing yesterday for my new desk planner for 2023, and it's a simple choice, but I put them side by side and just felt it out. What's going to bring me, a lighter heart day in and day out looking at it. But what I'm saying also is that when you are choosing between whether it's a service or a product, just tune into yourself and ask, what can I know here that would help me make the best choice for me? So cue your guiding consciousness that each of us has before you make the choice. Invoke its help.
And I think that's difficult. I think most people have such an external focus.
Yeah.
Instead of an internal focus. So it's not, and we'll just stick with the calendar. Is that calendar going to give me status? Right? Will it make me look better? Will people think I'm smarter?
Right, Rocky, I love what you're saying, because it's so true. And part of my mission is if we in the West only understood that our power, and I'm going to say it a different way than I said earlier, is from what's inside of us, that then creates the external, there would be so much more thriving. So we create that status. If I have a belief that I have to struggle as a woman, right? I can have the conditioning, I can have the imprints that my older brother is more important than me, from a generation used to valuing men more than women, let's say. I'm not saying that happened in my house, but there was a sense of, as a female spiritual teacher, I don't get the breaks as easily as a male does, who has way less qualifications, but better marketing and is not as powerful at what he does as what I do. So I say that because you could have very real aspects that feel like blockages to you, whether they're socioeconomic or sociopolitical. And the times we're in now is to rise above any victim talk, whether it's something you're feeling restricted from outside of you or it's your own storylines, so that you become more empowered to make more conscious choices where you're recognizing my power is in my choices. My power is in what is going on in here because I'm creating what's happening out there. I don't mean 100%. There's randomness, there's karma. It's not like I'm not super spiritual in the way of like everything that comes into my life is there for a reason because I've created it or I've magnetized it to me. It's none of that. Look at the next choice you have to make. And if you like its outcome, make more of the same. If you don't. And then start to tune in increasingly to just that mechanism of you making choices. And then see the increasing power you have to create your own status instead of relying on others, because you're slowing yourself the heck down by doing so.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And that's very true. I've always said, the biggest obstacle most people face is the reflection in the mirror.
And, it's one of my funnest. Now, I looked this up as a former English teacher. Funnest and most fun are both in acceptance nowadays. But for me, what is the funnest? One of the funnest things of the work I do is when I feel a person break free and their mind, my first tagline, make your mind your ally. And their mind has become more like their number one cheerleader instead of their number one enemy and judger.
And we judge ourselves worse than anybody else ever would.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you see a hypercritical person, like if you have a hypercritical spouse, family member, boss, just take a moment. And if that's what is coming out of their mouth to others, times that by 10, because that's what's going on inside their head. And just maybe have, instead of like disgust and running away from the person, compassion. Because we're treating others as a reflection of what we're saying inside our own heads.
Out of curiosity, just because as people look around today, COVID's been around, they've been quarantined, they're coming out, there's wars, there's inflation, there seems to be a lot of fear in the world. Is it real?
Well, I mean, in looking at the time that we have, I will summarize my response to you in saying 2011, I had Voice America come to me and ask me to do a radio show weekly on the Mayan galactic alignment of December 21st, 2012. They wanted me to talk about that. I was doing nothing in my business about that whatsoever. I was taking clients on private VIP retreats down to the Mayan ruins in the Yucatan in Mexico, because I live on the west coast of Florida, so it's a hop, skip, and a jump across the Gulf for me. But I wasn't doing anything in the public's eye. Nonetheless, I said, okay, give me 48 hours, I'll give you a decision. I did, I listened, it was a huge yes. I then did it for 2.5 years, interviewing experts about this December 21st, 2012 alignment. What I came to understand was that there is this era that ended. The Mayans that saw that it was a 26,000 year era ending then. Then Yogi Bhajan of the yogic culture, he's one of the main voices. He saw the end of a yuga, which is Sanskrit for era, in 2012. Professional astrologers, the end of the Piscean era, the beginning of the Aquarian era. And these are just 3 examples of the vast predictions that have happened throughout history for December 21st, 2012. It wasn't an end of the year kind of Y2K gig. It was instead, we're in a 20-year window, 2012 to 2032. My subtitle of my second book, Vibrational Upgrade, A Conspiracy for Your Bliss, Easing Humanity's Evolutionary Transition. My publisher knows my mission, and he had me include that wordy subtitle because of my mission. In this 20-year window, the first 10 years, 2012 to 2022, has been a ton of cleansing, a ton of rebalancing. And where things have been out of balance and needing to come into alignment, they've been brought to the surface, like the Black Lives Matter, like the Me Too movement. So where there's been abuse of power, where there's been lies told, where anything is needed to come to the surface or rebalance to be more aligned with a higher order, then it's been affected. And so not enough people have been, and if you look, there's more yoga studios before COVID. There's more meditation apps before COVID. There's more people talking about spirituality and crystals before COVID. I feel like COVID was a tail end of this cleansing because not enough people had proactively gone inside and done work on themselves. And then the second half we're in now, 2012 to 2032, is building a new era. In 2019, I went to Teotihuacan. It's a really cool Mayan and Aztecian ruin outside of Mexico City. We hired a native guide, and I asked him, okay, so the last era, what do you think about that compared to the new era coming up? He said the last era was about destruction. The new era is about construction. So if you look at the prefix con, it means with. And so I'm all about freeing people up for choices that are more conscious, both for your own life and then what we're doing. If we're each making choices more aligned with our heart that are higher, we're going to be creating a better situation collectively. And so that's the times we're moving into, where it's less about all of that stuff you talked about and less fear. But the fear is natural because there is this overall backdrop that people don't understand because we're moving into a new time. It is our most intense evolutionary leap ever it's been gauged for humanity. So the fear is reactive to the sense that people can't describe of massive change. And I don't mean technological updates.
So we had Dr. William Halal on a while ago, and he was talking about an age of consciousness. I've seen some of the futurists talking about that. There's Neil Howe has done a lot with his work called The Fourth Turning. So, I'm hearing this same message and similar time frames across multiple disciplines and people coming at it from very, very different eras. And so it's interesting to see how they all come together.
Yeah. And I mean, our ego minds are what's getting disciplined when we meditate. And it's given to us to navigate the physical plane, like lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. So it doesn't like the new, it doesn't like the unknown. Its job is to keep us protected in the face of it. So that's in great part why there's so much collective fear.
And how do we let go of that?
Have a sense of perspective on, like, that's why I just said what I said, instead of just saying, yeah, these are incredibly challenging times full of fear, and move on, right? I just went into what I went into, spending my oxygen in words in order to help people get perspective on why it's so uncomfortable right now for some, for many. And the way to do that is then to recognize your power within that you have to open up to a bigger perspective for yourself as well. So another way to say it is you reach for more of your potential. You reach for growth, and then you'll feel better. If you're staying in status quo, you'll feel more uncomfortable.
And again, it comes back to us. We have to make a choice of what we want to do and how we want to do it. And stepping into an unknown future for a lot of people is scary, and it prevents them from taking action.
Excuse me 1 second, though, but Rocky, look, it totally prevents them from taking action. And what you just did is perfect, because it's exactly what people do. They make all these leaps. I'm going into an unknown future. What if it's like what you said earlier, one step at a time? What would I like improved in my life? I'd like my money flows improved. Hey, she ran this clearing around like it being easier to have more money. Let me listen to that on a daily basis and see what else comes up. A new email comes in the inbox with a new opportunity. I ask my consciousness, does this feel good? Is this possible that it's going to give me what it's saying? No, then don't do it. Yes, then do it. One step at a time. It has to go in that pacing so that the universe can get your back, or your higher self, as we say in yoga, can get your back with showing you what choices to make and what choices not to make. One step at a time. It's not like this you're going to start living on like planet Pluto. You're here in a body on Earth, just maybe having more money coming in easier. It's not that big of a deal. I'm not talking about like, you're going to start riding a dinosaur or a dragon to work.
One step at a time. That's what it comes down to. You know what? You show up and you take one step. And we've talked about this many times. Everything compounds. Those steps compound over the years. And pretty soon, you've gone pretty far. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Choosing it.
And we choose it, right? It's our choice. What do we want?
So I get clearings where I'm not choosing what I want to choose. If I say I want abundance, and I see myself choosing lack, I know I have a block that I can get work on to get it cleared.
Interesting. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I don't have any answer to that. I don't have any regrets.
This isn't about regrets. It's like that aha moment.
Just how much support is available to us in the metaphysical. But I did kind of already know that. I really don't have an answer, Rocky.
That's okay. Maybe it was asking for that help. In the metaphysical, maybe
okay.
Even though you know it, but did I ask for it?
As much as, yes. Excellent. Thank you.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I used to teach. Don't listen to every thought you have.
Should you listen to any of
them? Question your thoughts.
Question your thoughts. I think that is perfect. If people would like to learn more about you, your books, what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Vibrational Upgrade. That's my website. That's my Facebook free group. My name is Alison, 1L, middle initial J, Kay is my last. I'm on YouTube. And go to my website and look at the chakra series if you want. You can self-assess. There's lists of the typical blocks in each chakra, and then there's a sample of clearings for them under each. That's the quickest way to start taking action.
And we'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rocky. This is fun. Have a good day. Bye, everybody. Blessings.
How often do you think about the 95% of actions you take every single day without thought? From brushing your teeth to driving somewhere. Do you pay attention, or are you on autopilot? Does that programming you're running on serve you well, or do you need an upgrade? I know mine does, and I keep searching for the best solution to get me to the next level. One step at a time, that's the way forward. I think the world is changing, and it's going to get better, but it may get worse first, so we just have to make it to the other side. It shouldn't be long. Check out some of the videos called The Fourth Turning, What Past Generations Can Teach Us About Our Future by William Strauss, or his book. It's quite intriguing. We've had a lot of guests on from many different disciplines who've talked about it from their viewpoint. Now we just gotta wait. Hopefully it happens soon. Next week, Maura Sweeney is back to join us. She is the happiness expert. She's going to talk about the reawakening, what we do post-COVID. If you enjoyed today's episode and know someone else who would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.